A sharp crash echoed through the luxury hotel hallway just after noon, followed by the sound of heels scraping helplessly across the polished floor. Every guest who witnessed the scene slowed for a second, glanced toward the woman struggling to stay on her feet, then quietly turned away as if someone else's pain wasn't worth interrupting their schedule. But one man carrying a worn backpack and holding his little daughter's hand didn't walk away. He had every reason to keep moving. He was already late for work, already drowning in bills, already carrying more burdens than most people could imagine. Yet in that single moment, Rowan Hale chose kindness over convenience. He had no idea that the woman leaning against the marble wall, exhausted and intoxicated, was his company's powerful CEO. He only saw someone who needed help before the wrong people found her. That one decision would change both of their lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness and second chances can completely change someone's life, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Legacy. Your support allows us to keep bringing heartfelt stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Rowan Hale was 36 years old and had been raising his 8-year-old daughter, Ivy, alone ever since his wife passed away after a long illness. Every sunrise began the same way. He prepared breakfast before dawn, packed school lunches, braided Ivy's hair despite never learning properly, dropped her at school, and rushed across the city to work as a facilities supervisor at Mercer Dynamics, one of the fastest growing technology companies in the country. His salary barely covered rent, groceries, and medical bills left behind from his wife's treatment. Luxury was something he only saw while repairing executive offices that cost more than his yearly income. The company had recently celebrated closing its biggest business deal ever. Executives had gathered at an upscale downtown hotel for meetings and a private luncheon while maintenance staff handled equipment and conference setup. Rowan had spent the morning ensuring every projector, elevator, and conference room functioned perfectly. Ivy had accompanied him because school had ended early for a teacher training day, and he couldn't afford a babysitter. She quietly colored pictures in an empty meeting room while her father worked. As Rowan finished loading equipment onto a maintenance cart, he noticed the woman stumbling down the hallway. Her expensive navy silk dress and designer jewelry suggested wealth, but her exhausted face told a different story. She looked less like someone celebrating success and more like someone carrying invisible wounds that had finally become too heavy. Two businessmen walked past her, exchanged amused smiles, and disappeared into the elevator. Another guest pulled out a phone, clearly considering recording the embarrassing moment. Without hesitation, Rowan stepped between the woman and the curious strangers. He gently guided her toward a quiet seating area where she wouldn't become the subject of gossip or viral videos. She struggled to remain conscious, whispering fragmented words that barely made sense. Rowan offered her bottled water, draped his jacket across her shoulders, and asked Ivy to wait nearby while he contacted hotel security, insisting they send a female manager rather than attracting unnecessary attention. His goal wasn't recognition. It was protecting a stranger's dignity. Within minutes, hotel management quietly escorted the woman to a private suite instead of allowing photographers or guests to witness the incident. Before leaving, she briefly opened her eyes and looked directly at Rowan. Her expression wasn't confused. It wasn't embarrassed. It was filled with relief, as though someone had finally treated her like a human being instead of a headline. Rowan never expected to see her again. The following morning, Mercer Dynamics buzzed with unusual excitement. Employees whispered that the CEO herself would personally visit several departments after returning from an important corporate event. Rowan ignored the gossip and focused on repairing a damaged electrical panel. Executive visits rarely affected people like him. Then the impossible happened. The company's board members entered the maintenance floor alongside an elegant woman wearing a tailored cream-colored suit. Her posture was confident, her eyes focused, and there wasn't the slightest trace of weakness left from the previous afternoon. The moment Rowan looked up, he recognized her instantly. She recognized him too. The entire room expected her to continue walking without acknowledging a maintenance supervisor. Instead, she stopped directly in front of Rowan. Silence spread across the workshop. Managers exchanged nervous glances. Many assumed she would pretend nothing had happened. She didn't. In front of everyone, she thanked Rowan for protecting her when she had been at her most vulnerable. She admitted she remembered everything. She remembered how he shielded her from public humiliation, how he refused to exploit her condition, and how his young daughter patiently waited beside him without judgment. She explained that she had attended the luncheon immediately after receiving heartbreaking news that her father, who had built the company decades earlier, had quietly entered hospice care. The pressure of leading thousands of employees while watching her last parent fade away had overwhelmed her emotionally. For the first time in years, she lost control. Her honesty stunned every employee. The CEO, Maris Ellington, wasn't simply expressing gratitude. She was demonstrating something rarely seen inside large corporations: humility. From that day forward, rumors spread rapidly. Some employees claimed Rowan would receive a promotion. Others insisted executives only wanted positive publicity. Rowan ignored every whisper. He continued arriving before sunrise, fixing broken equipment, and returning home each evening to help Ivy with homework. Several weeks later, Rowan received an invitation to meet Maris in her office. He assumed something had gone wrong. Instead, she asked about his life. No executive had ever done that before. She learned about his late wife, his financial struggles, the medical debt still haunting him, and Ivy's dream of becoming an architect someday. Rowan answered honestly without asking for sympathy. He simply believed people should tell the truth. Maris quietly reviewed his employment records after the meeting. She discovered something remarkable. For nearly 12 years, Rowan had never received a formal complaint. He had voluntarily covered shifts for sick coworkers hundreds of times. He had repaired critical equipment outside his job description without requesting overtime. Several anonymous employees credited him with helping them through personal crises by quietly paying for meals or arranging transportation when they couldn't afford it. His kindness had never been loud enough to reach executive offices. Until now. Maris introduced a new employee recognition program inspired by Rowan's example. Promotions would no longer depend solely on sales numbers or corporate politics but also on integrity, teamwork, and community impact. Not everyone appreciated the changes. Some senior managers believed compassion weakened business. One department director openly criticized Rowan, claiming maintenance workers shouldn't influence company culture. He viewed kindness as weakness and considered empathy a distraction from profits. Maris listened carefully before responding through actions rather than arguments. She invited every department to participate in a volunteer project renovating an abandoned neighborhood community center. Executives painted walls beside janitors. Engineers carried lumber beside receptionists. Rowan organized repair teams while Ivy spent the afternoon planting flowers outside the entrance. The project transformed more than a building. Employees who had barely spoken inside office walls laughed together under the afternoon sun. Barriers between job titles slowly disappeared. Productivity unexpectedly increased over the following months. Staff turnover decreased. Customer satisfaction improved. People weren't working harder because they feared punishment. They were working harder because they finally felt respected. Meanwhile, Rowan faced another personal challenge. His landlord announced the apartment building had been sold, forcing every tenant to relocate within 60 days. Housing prices had risen dramatically, and Rowan couldn't find anything affordable near Ivy's school. He hid the stress behind tired smiles. One evening Maris noticed Rowan staying unusually late repairing conference room lights. She gently asked whether everything was all right. For the first time, Rowan admitted he didn't know where he and Ivy would live. Maris didn't offer charity. She offered opportunity. The company owned several older residential properties originally built for relocating employees. One small home had remained vacant for years because it needed repairs. Instead of giving Rowan the house, she offered a long-term affordable lease if he was willing to restore it himself. It was exactly the kind of dignity Rowan valued. Every evening after work, father and daughter painted walls, repaired cabinets, planted trees, and slowly transformed the neglected property into a warm family home. Coworkers volunteered during weekends, bringing donated furniture, tools, and homemade meals. The house became proof that communities are built by many hands, not one generous person. Months passed. Maris eventually lost her father. The funeral attracted influential business leaders, politicians, and media personalities. Standing quietly near the back was Rowan and Ivy. They expected no recognition. But after the service, Maris walked past every distinguished guest until she reached them. She hugged Ivy first. Then she thanked Rowan once again, not for saving her career, but for reminding her that leadership begins with humanity. She admitted something she had never shared publicly. That afternoon in the hotel hallway, she hadn't only been drunk from emotional exhaustion. She had been moments away from giving up on herself. Watching a stranger protect her dignity without expecting anything in return convinced her the world still contained goodness worth believing in. If Rowan had walked away like everyone else, she wasn't sure she would have found the strength to continue leading the company or facing her father's final days. Years later, Mercer Dynamics became known not only for innovation but also for its employee-first culture. Business schools studied the company's transformation. Reporters searched for the secret behind its success. Most expected complicated management strategies. The real answer was astonishingly simple. Everything began because one exhausted single father refused to ignore a vulnerable stranger. His greatest qualification wasn't wealth. It wasn't education. It wasn't influence. It was compassion shown when nobody was watching. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who still believes kindness matters, subscribe to Kindness Legacy, and tell us in the comments about a moment when one act of kindness changed your life. Your stories inspire others more than you know. Special request. Before this story ends, please comment, kindness always comes back, if you believe that even the smallest act of compassion can create a life-changing ripple. As Rowan tucked Ivy into bed that evening inside the little house they had rebuilt together, sunlight poured through the windows they had installed with their own hands. The walls still carried the scent of fresh paint, the garden outside bloomed brighter every week, and the future no longer felt frightening. Across the city, Maris stood in her office looking at the skyline, grateful that on the worst day of her life, a stranger chose mercy instead of judgment. Neither of them had planned to become part of the other's story, yet fate quietly reminded them that the strongest people are not those who never fall, but those who lift someone else while carrying their own burdens. And sometimes, the greatest miracles begin in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when one simple act of kindness becomes the reason two broken lives finally begin to heal.